in 2013, before I retired, I came very, very close to checking out. Pretty much the plan that I had made. As a leader in the military, where do you go when things aren't going right? The deployment that I had just come off of, half my men were medevaced out of Afghanistan. One of my soldiers was killed that I felt responsible for. And then at the end of the deployment, my mom died. It was March of 2013 when I was contemplating suicide.
You're listening to the Kristof Lewis Podcast, a podcast where I have conversations with inspirational people. My name is Chris, but my family calls me Kristof. My goal is to have as many conversations as possible with people who have forged their own path by pursuing their dreams, making them a reality, all the while emitting positivity and sharing this knowledge with others. I seek these people out and share this information with you, proving to the world that you can do what makes you happy and do what you want for a living while being a good human being. We'll talk about careers, but we'll also cover any story that inspires. Let's do this while helping each other. Thanks for listening. I'm happy you're here. Hey, my friends, welcome to conversation number 93 of the Kristof Lewis Podcast. I'm absolutely thankful and excited that you're here with me for yet another episode. My guest is the amazing, the incredible Dan Jarvis. He's a military vet, former staff sergeant, and also wore a shield as a police officer. He suffered some great tragedies out forward deployed in Iraq and Afghanistan, and he suffered some great tragedies here at home with the loss of life. In some of his darkest moments, he shared with us today that he did not want to live anymore, and he explains how that happened, how he got there, and how he got through it. And now what he's doing to help other people suffering from the same thing. His story's incredible. He's a super humble guy, very friendly, and he's a beacon of hope. You can find this conversation and all the contemplations on kristoflewis.com/podcast. You can find me on Instagram at Kristof Lewis. So without further ado, welcome to the Kristof Lewis Podcast.
Hey, thanks for the invitation. I really appreciate it.
Absolutely. I was literally just saying a second ago, I think it's so cool how we connected. We're both in agreement that social media just blows me away. I never take it for granted. And to be able to, I think it speaks so much when somebody's like, I know this guy and I know this guy or girl and I know what they're about and I'm going to bring them together. And to me, right. I'll never take that for granted. I think it's so cool and it speaks wonders to the mutual friend of ours.
Incredible.
Yeah, man. And you have nothing short of an incredible background. You're a veteran yourself. I was in the Navy, and man, I know a lot of the struggles of, I was deployed to OEF as well. So we share that in our background, and I know you're no stranger to combat. Reading a little bit about you, and it's pretty incredible. But for those of us and the listeners that don't know too much about you, do you mind giving yourself a quick synopsis of who you are and what you did?
Yeah, my name is Dan Jarvis. Actually, my father was career Navy, so my active rebellion in high school was to join the Army. He took it much better than I expected. But I did time in the military when I was younger, did 2 years, did the college fund, got out, went into law enforcement for about 4.5 years. 9/11 happened, and I found myself back in a uniform. Mm-hmm. My last period of service was about 10 years. I was medically retired September 11th of 2014. I had a 15-month tour in Iraq. I had a 12-month tour in Afghanistan. And then I did a 2-year tour as a drill sergeant for the Army at Fort Knox, Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
I think that was worse than both deployments together.
I've never done that, but being in the Navy, and that's so cool that your family was in the Navy as well, but being in the Navy and seeing what they go through, like their schedule is the most rigorous schedule I've ever seen. Like anything I ever endured, like you just said on deployment, taking care of the kids that are in boot camp is something I never wanted to do. So I'm sure that was really tough.
Yeah, it was very long days. So.
Yeah, man. And thanks for sharing so much with us, all of that. And I know you're no stranger to, I want to dive deep and I want to dive quick. What you're doing with 22-0, I want to talk about that. Is very important to veterans, obviously. If you want to explain what that is, I want to dive into that and why you started that.
Full disclosure, in 2013, before I retired, I came very, very close to checking out. That was pretty much the plan that I had made. As a leader in the military, where do you go when things aren't going right? The deployment that I had just come off of, half my men were medevaced out of Afghanistan. One of my soldiers was killed that I felt responsible
Yeah.
for. And then at the end of the deployment, my mom died. And it was March of 2013 when I was contemplating suicide. Um, just a twist of fate. One morning, I get a phone call, and one of the kids in the platoon that I had just come out of had killed himself that same night. That I was seriously giving thought to this, and it just kind of shook me, and it kind of woke me up a bit. And preparation for that memorial service, that's kind of what really got me totally out of that mindset. Because when I saw how it affected the other men, I'm like, there's no way this cannot be my option. So I just kind of pushed through it. After I retired, my plan was to go back into law enforcement. One of my kids that was injured, his father was the sheriff of Seminole County, Florida, Don Esslinger Sr. And Donnie, his son, was injured pretty bad.
Mm-hmm.
So at the end of our deployment, we brought all the wounded warriors and the Gold Star families up to Fairbanks, up to Fort Wainwright. That's where I met him. I was kind of his guide while he was up there, and we connected. And so that was kind of my plan. I mean, I knew I had a plan, and I got out and went back to school. Had to go all the way back through the academy again.
Okay.
Then I met my wife, and that kind of changed everything. Changed my plans because she actually works for a sheriff's office where I live.
Okay.
And she's got to stay inside the county, so I went to a different county than Don Esslinger Senior's. But so I find myself 2 years. I was doing okay in uniform. Once again, you got a uniform on, you got wearing a gun, you have a purpose, life's good, and then I had to transition out of law enforcement. A lot of back issues.
Sure.
My wife and I talked about it. It was like, this is just,
I'm all too familiar with that.
I'm 48 years old. This is definitely that profession for the 25-year-old.
Yeah.
So chasing bad guys wasn't really something I wanted to do for the rest of my career. So when I left law enforcement, the transition started again. And then, I kind of make the analogy, when the music stops, that's when the demons come back.
Yeah.
Went into severe nightmares again. I mean, my wife would wake me up in the middle of the night trying to calm me. And I didn't know really what was going on. And she finally asked me if I would go get some help. And because I didn't want to screw up my relationship with her, I mean, we had only been married a couple of years at this point. I did. I went to the VA and, went through a rigorous testing or whatever it is that they do. And
sure.
The guy goes, well, do you know what your diagnosis is? And I knew there was something wrong, but I said, no, nobody's officially said it. And he goes, well, you have post-traumatic stress disorder with major depressive disorder. And the only thing I heard in that conversation was disorder.
Sure.
And then here's a prescription. So I go through exposure therapy at the VA. I don't know if you're familiar with that. It's where you have to relive the events.
Yeah. Yep.
Retell the story. They want you to record it. They want you to listen to it. I went to a couple appointments. My wife said I was starting to get worse, and then the VA had canceled an appointment. Long story short, after 2 cancellations, I just stopped going.
You're done.
So, I'm still left here hanging. I mean, now the emotions are even more raw now than when they were very well put away. And that once that box gets open, you got to deal with it.
Yeah.
So my wife brought in a gentleman to her sheriff's office to do leadership training, and he's was a former Army Colonel, Green Beret. His name's Scott Mann. I don't know if you know him.
I don't.
But he invited me to one of his men's leadership groups, and I went, and I met some incredible people there. And this one guy started talking to me, this new treatment for post-traumatic stress. And so I'm listening, he just kept going on. And his name is Tom Padilla. He's out in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Next thing I know, September of last year, I'm sitting in a chair in Albuquerque, New Mexico, in front of a classroom of mental health counselors having this procedure done. It's called the Reconsolidation of Traumatic Memories Protocol, the RTM.
Okay.
And 45 minutes later, I'm like, the hell did you just do to me? Because you felt the shift internally in the brain.
Sure.
And what it does is it takes you out of the fight or flight response without having to retell, without having to relive it. So the nonprofit that we started was basically a connecting organization that can close the gap between those who can provide services and those who need it.
Interesting.
Part of our mission, we also include first responders.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are no stranger to that as well.
No, not at all.
That.
But the really cool thing is, getting connected with Dr. Burke. He's the actual founder of the RTM protocol, the Research and Recognition Project. If you have anybody that wants to look into the research,
but yeah, thank you.
Prepared. It's written by a bunch of PhDs. So we started actually sponsoring mental health counselors. We paid because it's a new treatment and nobody wants to pay for it.
Yeah.
So we started raising money and helping scholarship counselors to take the training. And then they start utilizing it. Then we have people that we can refer people to. Nationally, right now, there's probably about 160 of these therapists, and we need about 10,000. That's kind of where we are. We're kind of at the beginning of it.
Yeah, sure.
So, but I'm kind of a big outside the box thinker, and if I talk too fast, tell me to slow down. Sometimes that drill sergeant doesn't want to depart. So. I'm being the outside of the box kind of thinker. I'm talking with Dr. Burke, and I'm like, one of the things in the first responder world, say cops, they don't want to talk to counselors, right? Nobody wants to talk to a therapist, because he's already talking about being able to train military combat medics, special forces medics, corpsmen to do this protocol on the battlefield.
Oh wow!
So why can't we do the same thing with first responders? So they started getting into the legal aspects of it, and most law enforcement agencies and most fire departments, they have what's called a CISMS team, which is a critical incident stress management.
Okay.
And what they do is when an event happens, they get this group together, and there's a counselor that's typically there. So now they're going to actually start training first responders to be able to peer administer the protocol. And then they report back to the therapist, say, hey, yep, we did 3 sessions. He's good to go. And then you take care of the problem on the front end so that it never becomes a problem on the back end.
Okay.
So that's kind of where we are. We have a training coming up in Tallahassee, Florida in October. And right now I think we have 3 deputy sheriffs from the town that I'm from. And then we're also trying to get a couple SF medics out of Eglin Air Force Base. Sure. We're trying to get we have a couple Air Force guys also out of Eglin that are going to attend the training, get trained, and then, of course, there's no liability for the Research and Recognition Project when you're dealing with government employees because, well, first you got to ask permission to sue the government, and they're not going to give it to you. Yeah. So they're able to train those guys, and they'll be able to take that back to their duty stations. And the cool thing is, especially like the special operations world, you guys are getting just bombarded with the biggest missions. You guys endure a lot more than us grunts do. I was just a grunt. I'm an infantry guy.
It's different work. It's different work.
It's different work. So now imagine if you're on the battlefield, you experience a traumatic event, and they're able to run you through this protocol, which is neurological. It's not psychotherapy. And they can shut off that fight or flight response and then process that memory so that the negative emotion is no longer associated with that memory. They actually impose a new emotional state to the old memory. So it'll actually clear out because we tend to delete and distort data when we process it. We either understand it, delete it, or distort it. And traumatic memories typically get stored differently than regular memories.
Yeah,
it's kind of like the amygdala at the base of your brain. Kind of like the old days when saber-toothed tiger comes out. You got to run or do you got to freeze? You got to fight. Well, we just stay in the fight mode, and that's all PTSD is being stuck in the fight or flight. That's it.
Yeah. So
now they're able to quickly just turn it off.
That's absolutely. I mean, it's so cool that that's even a thing. I mean, it's newer. Like, I think I heard Dakota Meyer talk about it. I'm not sure if you're familiar with him, but he was on the podcast, and he was in OEF as well. We actually were running through the same valleys at different years, but so crazy. It's such a small world. But he was struggling with similar things from his situation as well, and I think it's so cool. I'm all about offering different resolutions for the same thing, and not just being like, you have to do it this way. So to hear that there's these different resolutions and that you can apply them even on the battlefield is blows me away, to say the least. And I just ultimately, I'm like, does it work or doesn't it work? Like, I'm that kind of guy, because you're talking about back injuries, and I had a neck injury that I'm literally you're talking to me the week that it's the first time in 4.5 years that it hasn't hurt for more than a week. And I'm just so for, what does it take? Well, let's figure out a way to do it. There's not one way to heal somebody, and let's just keep on pressing that. So it couples with one of the other things I like talking about is like helping others, right? So for you to see, like you said, unfortunately there was a suicide, and you saw how it affected everybody else, all the other guys and your group, and to actually take a step back and be like, I don't want to, like, I'm struggling with a lot of shit right now, but I don't want to affect everybody like this. So you thought outwardly as well. And I love seeing that. And it's crazy that you didn't just stop there. You're like, how can I take it further? So you seeked out this treatment, and then you didn't stop there. Like, now you're doing 22-0. And to me, like, that is the epitome of what this podcast is sharing your story, which is super hard. You've obviously done it a few times, but to keep on sharing it over and over again in the hopes to continue to help yourself and also help others, it just speaks wonders. I really, really love that. Do you think there's something, like, what do you think with yourself is different between you, or what propelled you to want to actually continue to help somebody and create 22-0 and do all of this? Because a lot of people maybe are struggling with things, and they barely can keep their head afloat. So I think, like, I know what my answer is, and I can share it with you, but I'm kind of curious. Like, I know why I share my story, but I'm kind of curious why you continue to share your story and you want to help people even more and more.
Well, one of the things that I found is in sharing the story, that's what connects you with other people.
Yeah.
When I first put my story out on I sat there, I'm like, do I hit send on that Facebook?
It's so hard.
And then once you send it, it doesn't come back.
Yeah.
And I had a video, it got circulated like 10,000 times.
Oh, wow.
Holy cow.
Yeah.
And I had people reaching out to me from all over the place. I'm like, this is pretty crazy. I had a cop in a county over reach out. I'm like, how did you find me? Well, my friend from Tennessee sent me this video.
Holy
I couldn't
crap.
stop watching it.
So cool.
Like, it's just crazy. So
I love that.
Just to be able to share that story. If 80% of the guys that go through what we go through, they're fine, right? They don't have problems. We're trying to help that 20% who are struggling.
Yeah.
But probably half of what's left is really, really struggling. My battalion from Afghanistan, we've had about 5 suicides since 2012, since returning.
Wow.
So, I mean, that's a staggering number, and we probably had an equal number of close calls.
Mm-hmm.
So to be able to help somebody, to get them out of that dark place, I've been there.
Yeah.
It's probably the worst place on the planet to be. And to know that there is a solution, and to be able to, we find resources to help pay for their treatment.
Yeah, that's awesome. So cool.
We even flew up a couple from the Virgin Islands. He's a former Marine, and when I picked him up at the airport, he's like, I was explaining to him the process of what he's going to go through. He's like, part of my language, my drill sergeant's going to come out in a second. He's like, I think you're full of shit, and I'm like, good. We need skeptics. Doesn't matter what you think. And he says, if this thing works the way you say it does, I'll get 22-0 tattooed on my ass. And I'm like, all right, I'm going to hold you to that. 4 days later, he's sitting in the office, and he kind of drops his head. He looks at me and goes, well, I'm a man of my word. I think I need your logo.
That's
so
hilarious,
like,
man.
whatever you do, don't put it on your butt, on your backside. Put it somewhere somebody can see what it means. So,
what? That's so crazy. That's awesome though, because like you said, and I'm glad you had an ear for that. Like, there should be skeptics. Like, I am all about that. Like, thousands of people hear me. This is, by the time this coming out, it's probably closer to 140 plus episodes, and I encourage people. I don't want you to agree with everything I say. Yep. You shouldn't. I need the skepticism. I need that to grow. So if you're going to grow as an organization, especially when you want to help people, you need to know what works, what doesn't work. And you need to have people that are going to call you out, because that guy, if it wouldn't have worked, he wouldn't have bullshitted you. He would have been like, it doesn't work. So when that person, that skeptic comes in and goes, hey, and they hang their head low and they're like, I gotta get a tattoo now. Like, I think that's hilarious and really funny, and that's awesome. So did he actually get the tattoo? Do you know? Did he get it?
I asked his wife, and so far he hasn't gotten it.
Oh man,
and I'm okay with it.
We're gonna call that guy
I
up.
I mean,
we're gonna podcast
I'm
number
not
2.
holding
We're gonna get him on the line. We're gonna do a 3-way call. No, I'm just kidding. But
we could do that.
yeah, the most important part is that it helps somebody else, and it helps somebody else that was doubtful. And I think sometimes some people struggle with things for so long. Like, again, my neck, 4.5 years. I was doubtful, specialist after like military couldn't do it. Then I got to the civilian world and I was like, thank God, like I'm going to get some, like, no offense to military if they're listening, like military doctors, but I was like, I'm going to get a different perspective at least, and different perspectives are so important. And then at 1 specialist, 2 specialist, I don't know what's going on. The second specialist I saw, literally his second sentence to me was, so you're the puzzle. And I'm like, that is not what I want to hear, man. Like,
exactly.
I wanted you to be able to help me here. So I totally get it. And like I said, the most important part is that you're going out there and you're helping guys and girls, and that is so incredible to me. And I actually do want to back up for 1 second. And towards the beginning, you said something about purpose. I even created an episode about purpose, and you said you got behind the gun again and the shield, and you were able to help people and have a sense of purpose again. And I know that's something that I struggled with so much. And the military provided that, and especially working in naval special warfare provided that unequivocally. Sure. And even when I worked outside of NSW, when I was in leadership position just on a shore command, I still had a great sense of purpose for what we were doing. And for me, that's kind of hard. Like, people know on this podcast, I'm working IT now, and I'm very happy for my job, but I don't have that sense of purpose. So for me to hear you say that, like, obviously I'm not the only one that struggles with that. And now, you had military, you had police. How do you redefine that purpose? I'm all about, the Kristof Lewis podcast, create your career, and you created something. You created 22-0. So to me, like, you're a perfect case study for, you had this purpose. So I really want to, if you're listening to this and that was you, or again, if you had another job and you're a civilian, like, it doesn't matter to me. Like, if you lost your purpose, you can go out there and create it. And for me, it's so cool because not only are you helping people, but now you have a sense of purpose, and you're able to, like, fill all the billets, like all the brackets have been checked, all the boxes have been checked, and you're able to do that at once. So I wanted to not forget that and call that out. It's so cool.
Yeah. Thanks, buddy. Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I think one of the other things that really excites me about this new treatment is the fact that it works with kids.
Oh, okay.
We went down to, we did some fundraising in Coral Springs, Parkland, Florida, where the Marjorie Stoneman Douglas high school shooting was.
Oh, okay.
And we had a training with 25 mental health counselors down there, and some of them are actively working with the students. We had a case where this young girl, I think she was going into her junior or senior year, totally isolated, totally withdrawn after that. Had been doing all kinds of therapy and got her connected. And she did about 5 sessions, and she's going back to Disney World, and she can watch the fireworks again, and she can do all the things that she could do before. Wow. So to me, that's super exciting.
Wow. I was not expecting that. Yeah. Yeah. That's very cool.
I could tell you story after story because I've done a couple other podcasts where people have reached out. There was a lady who called. Her husband was a pastor at a small church, and they had to move because their 14-year-old son was bullied so bad that the kid wanted to kill the kids at the school and then kill himself, which we can go back to any of these mass shooting events, and that's the anatomy of a school shooter. So he got hospitalized for 36 days, medicated. Sure. And finally, his therapist gave up on him, and we were able to connect. They took a 10-hour trip to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and got with, we're talking 4 days worth of treatment. And she sent me a message back saying that nightmares are gone, his nervous tics are gone. He's still angry at the kids who did that to him. Yeah. But he's living a normal, productive life as a happy kid. Wow. So that's how cool this is.
Yeah, that's I think at a bare minimum for anybody that's struggling right now, and I'm glad you brought that up because you don't have to be military or first responder to like PTSD it can affect anybody clearly, and I know that's obvious to some people, but maybe not obvious to other people. So I want to definitely call that out. And for me to hear that, like grown men and women experiencing things in combat or whatever is one thing. Horrific for what it is. But I think, like, obviously now I was like telling you I have a 6-month-old, and now having a kid, like, I cannot even begin to tell you the emotions that would swell up knowing that my kid experienced something like that. So to know, like, I raised this kid, they were like, up to 17 years old. I know that this is my child, and now they're not themselves, and kind of rightfully so. That's a horrific tragedy. You mentioned fireworks. So for somebody to come in and be able to be like, hey, again, I offer a different resolution. Try it out. If it doesn't work, it doesn't work, but it could work. I know it will work. We can help you out. And if somebody came into my life like that offers hope, like, man, that's pretty incredible.
That's what I call myself, an ambassador of hope.
Love that. And that's what it is. It's hope. It's hope. Man. So I think I already know the answer to this question, but maybe you'll surprise me. But your biggest obstacle, was it that one night that you shared with us? Or was there something else maybe that you could relate even sooner or more recent than that, like an obstacle in your life where you didn't think that you could turn things around and you turned it around? And I feel like that's already what we've talked about a little bit, but is there something else that stands out to you that was a huge obstacle that you overcame and you learned something great from it?
I would say the largest obstacle was that day we lost Doug Cordo on that convoy.
Yeah.
And feeling responsible.
Yeah.
That was my biggest. I hated myself after that. I really did.
Yeah.
And to overcome that and to be able to get past that, my heart goes out to his mom. I mean, he was an only child. She still struggles.
Yeah.
I've stayed in touch with her, trying to get help to her as best I can. But that was my biggest obstacle to overcome.
I appreciate you sharing with us. It's not, like I said, it's not easy to share all this stuff. I've shared some stuff on this podcast about myself, some of the experiences that I've greatly struggled with. I had a whole podcast dedicated to it, and it's better out than in. I choose to share it, and I know it's one thing dealing and struggling with something yourself, but I know when it's somebody else's life, and especially when you feel responsible, that's completely different. So I think, again, like, one of the great points from that is that you did overcome it. And of course you still think about it and you still struggle with it. I think about all the shit that I've been through too, all the time, but I can just deal with it better. And I think it speaks so much to say and to show you right now talking to me that you've got through it. And despite all this, being on the wrong side of a weapon, losing somebody, everything that you described to us, your mother, like, there's still hope. You are the ambassador of hope. And I understand, like, everybody's lives are different. Everybody's experiences and tragedies are different. And even two people could experience the same exact tragedy right next to each other and have different results from that. So I'm not saying anything that everybody hasn't heard before, but I'm just saying, like, there's hope and it's possible to get through it. And especially with offering different resolutions, and just don't lose hope. I know that's one of the most important things that I've ever latched onto, is not to lose hope. And even if we dialed it way back to, like, we're not talking about lives on the line. We're not talking about our mental health. We're talking about, like, jobs. I talk about careers a lot. Like, don't lose hope. Like, if you don't like your job, if you don't like what you're doing, and if you're not in a healthy environment, like the child you said, I think he was being bullied so much, they had to move. Like, remove yourself from the environment. Even if you think your back is against the wall, more than likely, if you think outside of the box, like you said, there's probably a way out, and it wouldn't have happened unless you started thinking outside the box and looked at some other remediations for yourself too. So I think that's pretty incredible. Thank you for sharing that.
Appreciate you for allowing me to share it.
Yeah, absolutely. How do you stay current on everything that you described with the RDM protocol and with being able to, like, stay at the tip of the new spear, but before you're on the tip of the spear doing other things forward deployed? But I'm huge on education, and whether it's formal education, self-education, but how do you keep yourself, like, the most current you possibly can with what you're doing?
I do a lot of reading, and I'll pick up a phone and talk to Dr. Burke for a while. If you want to get your mind blown away, talk to that guy. He's absolutely brilliant. I'm like, how do you even hold a conversation with him without a dictionary? It's beyond me. But I get all of this research. I study as much as I can. have to be willing to get outside of your comfort zone.
Yes, I agree.
Like me, I was a very private person, so getting in front of a crowd of people and telling your story, that was a huge step for me.
Good for you.
But the more I find myself doing it, the more I'm able to connect with people. And every time I talk with somebody, I was at an event up in Tennessee, and a full bird colonel from Fort Bragg comes up to me and, introduces himself, not as that. He didn't tell me that till about 10 minutes into the conversation, but he's like deputy commander for special operations. And next thing I know, I'm like, hey, we're going to be in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Send me a couple of your medics. We'll train them. If you want to come get trained too, get trained. Let's go. So I mean, that's just that one connection is, who knows where that could go. I mean,
yeah, that's incredible. And I think one of the important things you said is like ongoing. Like you're reading. I'm huge on reading. I'm reading a lot more than ever now. Reading articles online. Having these conversations with people like yourself, like that's one of the biggest ways I learn right now. So continuing, like you had that conversation you just said with him, continuing the conversation in person, through books, through things like we're doing right now, just continuing is the most important thing I can take away from here. Your education's never done. And I think if you want to be the best, it sounds cliche. I'm like shaking my head over here if you're listening to the episode, but like it sounds cliche. If you want to be like the best version of you, if you want to help people the most, if you want to help yourself the most, then you got to continue your own education, continue learning, because obviously we know technology is always shifting, and I'm sure this is no stranger to that as well.
Absolutely.
Man, Dan, I can't thank you enough for sharing your story, for sharing everything you've gone through. And I know it's not easy, even though you said yourself, you talked about it before clearly, and it's so like my answer, I'll even go back. I was like, I know my answer, but I know that when I share my story with the intention of wanting to help other people, it continues. Like I am healing as I do that, as I talk about my experiences, and especially people like you specifically, I know you've gone to similar places where I've gone, experienced similar, loosely I say that, in the same AOR, and there's a way to connect with that. So I would encourage people to connect with people that you can relate to. And like you said once, like I was there, I was contemplating it, I almost did it. And then now when somebody says, oh, you would never understand, well, I'll be like, actually, not to compare, but I was there too. I was feeling this is how I felt, and this is how I got through it. So I think it's just so important to answer like a little bit more on your self-education bit, is like not only continuing self-education, but like just continuing to share the story and converse with people and have that conversation. So thank you so much. If people want to find you, find 220, how can they get a hold of you?
We have a website, www.22zero.org. We're on Facebook, 220, just on Facebook. I'm now on Instagram. I'm trying to get a hold of this social media.
Yeah.
It's crazy. But they can contact me, dan@220.org. Send me an email. We can connect. We'll call. I can give them my cell phone. And if you know anybody suffering, just connect them with us so we can eliminate that suffering.
All right, my friend. Well, have a good night, and thank you so much. See you later.
Thank you, brother.